Right, welcome to the very last video from Rough as Guts Videos, Video 11, GUI architecture. This, I have to admit, is a somewhat difficult topic that you'll learn more about when you go on into software engineering levels 2 and 3. I just want to talk briefly. I want to introduce you to a new idea, the idea of a particular architectural pattern for graphical user interfaces called the modern Model View Controller pattern. So just an idea, hang in there if you can, it won't be examined, I assure you. So here's the idea. Well, I'm going to actually come over here and look at a piece of code which was the student lookup GUI that we looked at in the video before last. So I think you can see that as we start to build more and more complex GUIs, this sort of mess here is going to get worse and worse, a porridge if you like. And we'll have a heap of different event handlers for the different events that can occur on the user interface, and generally things get a bit out of control because the logic of the program is all going to be mixed up in the event handlers. So how do we manage that? How do we control this increasing complexity? And the modern approach to it is to separate out the state of the application into one or more classes called the model, and the GUI aspect, the view of it, is separated out into one or more classes called views. So it might be, for example, that you have different views even within the same program. If you use Microsoft Word, you switch to an outline view, or you switch to a web view or a printer view. They're all the same model, all the same document, but you're looking at different views of it. And then there's another component which is kind of a more minor one, which tries to synchronize the view with the model. So it's responsible for, say, event handlers causing changes to the state of the model. So that's a pretty abstract idea, and certainly none of the stuff we've been doing so far has warranted that. But I did implement a final example of a TK application called Poker Patience, really. So that's implemented in a set of classes, the card, deck, hand, and hand view class. So let me just try to explain here what this separation is. So we've got a class for card. Let's look at that very quickly. Here's the class for a card. It represents a card in a deck, has a suit and a face value. So each card has a value and a suit. So three of clubs, 4 of spades. It can be printed because we like to print things, or represented through the repr method. There's another class here called a deck, which imports from card, and it has the methods to shuffle it, to get a card from the top of the deck, to plug in a card at the bottom of the deck, for example. It's got the set of possible values that cards can have and the set of suits that cards can have. Notice there's nothing at all GUI about this. This is the model. It has nothing to do with the view of the model. And there's another class, hand, which again has no GUI stuff in it at all. It's what a hand consists of. So a hand consists of a set of cards. And you can say how many cards are in it. You can say what deck it's been taken from. That's slightly odd maybe. And it has a deal method. So you can deal from the deck into the hand with a constraint that some of the cards are being held. I'll explain that in a minute in the video. Then lastly, I have something which is the hand view. So let me just run that so you can see what I'm talking about here. So if I run that program there, there's the Poker Patience game being played. So it's got a set of 5 cards, and I try to make poker hands. So I don't know, I'll hold those 2. That's what checking those box means. And I'll deal new cards into those 3 slots. And maybe I'll hold the jack and 2 more, and I can try and build up a good poker hand. If you know anything about poker, and I don't know much about poker myself, that's a poker hand. That's what this thing is all about. And all of the GUI stuff is buried in this thing called the hand view, which imports the card, hand, and deck classes in order to present a GUI. Now, I don't want to go through it in detail. It's full of stuff you don't need to know. How do you deal with checkboxes? How do you deal with images? How do you get images out of a folder of images and so on? I just present it purely and simply as an example of a program that uses, or sort of uses, the model view approach. It doesn't really have much in the way of controller, but it certainly has separation between the bits of the model that represent the state and the stuff that represents the GUI. And if this were a real poker patience game and you were scoring the hands, all the logic associated with a poker patient game would go into the hand. It's nothing to do with the view of it. It's part of the actual, sometimes called the business model for the particular application. Just one other thing I wanted to say, and that is to draw your attention to the integrated development environment, IDE, that I was using to demonstrate the GUI poker hand thing. It isn't Wing. It's another program called Thonny that we are considering as a possible alternative to Wing for next year. And I guess the only thing to note about it really, it's a pretty typical sort of IDE, got lots of menu options. You can turn on displays of various things like the variables in the program and scroll through them, etc. Turn those off again. The only thing I wanted to draw your attention to is that this is a free open source program written in Python using tkinter. So it just shows that you can write pretty programs which look quite professional in Python plus tkinter. So that's all for this year, at least as far as videos go. Thank you for coming. Hope you've enjoyed the course, and I hope to see some of you next year. Not in COSC 121 preferably, ENCE 260 perhaps. Thanks and bye.